No, I'm sorry, Barry. You're not part of this game. I understand it's about animals in the zoo, and I understand there are bears in the zoo, but I'm sorry, buddy. You're not in this one. I don't know. They got the lion.
Join the team.
I mean, there is polar bears, but you know. Hey team, it's McGuire Review, and today we're going to be taking a look at a brand new game coming to Kickstarter for the second time. This game is called Zoocracy and is from Haas Games. We have got 12 plus on this one, 2 to 6 players, and 60 to 120 minutes. Now, I will say, on the first time that this game came to Kickstarter, they did not fund. They are going to be going to Kickstarter again very soon, if not the day this video is released. Possibly the next day. It's going to be very, very close from when this video comes out to when the next Kickstarter is going to be kicking off for Zoocracy. I will say they have improved quite a few of the rules. They've made the game a lot more streamlined and a lot better, in my opinion, than it actually was upon the first run of this one. So, what is Zoocracy about? This is the type of game, team, that you're going to want to get in on if you really like those little bit longer gameplays with your game group. Again, it is 60 minutes to 120 minutes. I will say it does tend to go into that past the hour range in playing this game. And that really is because there's a lot of phases you're going to go through round to round. There's actually 7 phases you'll go through within each round. And each one of those phases, outside of a couple of them, there will be a lot of discussion and a negotiation and how things actually play out around the board. And that's why if you love these kind of high strategy, think multiple rounds in advance, really debate and politically position yourself well, you're going to really like Zoocracy. I will also have to say that there are quite a few political type games out there in the landscape right now in the board gaming genre, and this one does a really, really good job in this genre. I will say it's probably one of the best political games that are out there right now. I think it follows a very realistic approach from setting up and running a government. Some of the negotiations you can have and then you can kind of come back on, which I think adds kind of a fun mechanic to this game as well. Absolutely love the artwork. The artwork and the theme on this is, they really nailed it with the artwork and the theme, and I think it was necessary for a kind of game like this. If you're really doing more of a political style game, having a theme that is light with the animals, the cartoony artwork, I think really kind of locks in the fun of this game. Alright teams, this is going to be a bare minimum review of Zoocracy, and we're going to look and see just kind of what are the components that we've got here on the table, as well as kind of how a round of gameplay is going to play out. Now you can see there isn't going to be a lot from a component perspective out on the table that you're going to have as a player. I kind of like that with a game like this. That way you're more focused on what's happening within the rounds, in your negotiations, versus having tons of little components to manage with a game already that you're putting a lot of strategic thought into, because each one of these phases that you're going to go through as you're playing the game aren't necessarily going to happen every single round. So for instance, you're going to elect a president. That's going to happen every other round. You're going to elect parliament. That's going to happen every other round. However, you're going to be campaigning for parliament and seats in parliament every single round. And there's also cards that you can get in the game that will change what can happen within each round. So you may have a strategy played out where you're like, oh, okay, I know that in a couple rounds there's going to be a presidential election again, so I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, because there's a part of this game where you're going to actually form the government and make some negotiations with other players, and someone may change that on you and actually make that presidential election happen much faster based on cards in the game. And that's a nice little mechanic to sort of switch up how this game actually plays out and works. So from a component perspective, every player is going to get one of these little political agenda tokens that are right here. That there is a blue one, and I think I've lost my blue one here in the sea of food tokens, but each player is going to get one of these political agenda tokens. You're going to use it to track your political agendas over the course of the game. The way to win this game is you want to be the first player that's able to get to the last political agenda here on the political agenda track and win the game. The game can also end if a special card comes out and it's in the event track here, or the event deck, and that's this one right here. So if this card is ever drawn, and it will be shuffled into the bottom 3 cards of the deck, so you're not really sure when it's going to be coming out. And every round you will be drawing one of these little event cards. There will be an event that will take place. However, when that card comes out, that will automatically end the game, and then it's just whatever player is the furthest along the political agenda track will be the winner. If there ever is a tie, it will come down to how much food you've acquired, but that also really links in, and I like the way they did this. You acquire food by gaining votes and gaining seats within Parliament. So the more votes you have, the more seats you have in Parliament, the more food you can gain within those rounds. So that really plays out. It isn't just like, oh, well, just randomly however much else of something you have. It really does make a true winner if there's a tie on the political agendas. If you have more food than another player, you probably did better over the course of the game in gaining votes from the various different animal species and gaining more seats in Parliament. Okay, so you're going to have your political agenda tracker. You're also going to have a few little tokens here that are going to track when things happen round to round. The presidential election, the Parliament election, and obviously just your round token there is going to kind of move along the board to show where those things might take place, just so you can kind of see, hey, in a couple rounds we're going to go for the presidential election again. And that's what these 3 little tokens here are going to be used for. They're just going to kind of move around this board. You can see each one of these little areas here is a various different round of the game that can take place as you're trying to get that ultimate political agenda goals locked in there for the win. Okay, these here are going to correspond to the food tokens that you're going to use to cash in to put on your various different species areas to try to gain votes from those different types of animals. So, for instance, on a parliamental campaign phase, I may want as the blue player, and there is a certain amount of food you can cash depending on how many players is playing. Let's just say I was able to cash, I wanted to cash 3 food tokens in for blue here on the polar bears because I wanted to get the 5 votes. So every single one of these areas will actually have a little sign in them, and the bigger number is the amount of votes that you'll gain, the amount of seats in Parliament you'll gain if you win that species vote. And the other red smaller number is just the number that if you are in second place, you'll get that many votes. If you're anything less than that, you don't get any votes. It's really first place and second place on these are going to count for those votes for Parliament when you go to that stage. That's what these little tokens are going to be used for. You're just essentially going to cast votes, and each player will have a set number of these food tokens. You'll also receive these little tokens where you can vote yes or no. There's parts of this game where you will vote no confidence. If there's ever, if the government seats are ever, outdone by the opposing majority, then you will have to go for a no confidence vote, and you'll have to vote to say, hey, do we want to keep the current form of government in place or go back and renegotiate what the government looks like round to round. And that can be a really fun mechanic of this game as well. And then you're going to have a little token here that will represent how many seats in Parliament each player has. That will correspond to your player color. You just set that simply right over the number of how many votes all add up to whatever you have. That's how many seats in Parliament you'll get. You'll set that token right on top of that. Okay. You will also have a form of a player board here that will tell you kind of a high level, the phases that are in the game, as well as what some of the iconography in the game mean. There is a set number of iconography. You'll find it right here on this board. And then in the rule book, it will explain what each one of those symbols means. So you will have to do a little bit of memorization to some of those symbols because it isn't really printed on any of the cards. It isn't really printed on this sheet either. It's at a very, very high level. Tells you, like, this little cup, arrow, and then two what looks like wheat food symbols means party donation. And then you'd have to look in the book to see, oh, what does party donation mean? There isn't too many of them. You can see here in the rule book, there's just a few different things that you have to remember. And after you've played the game a few rounds, you're going to start to memorize these pretty easily. And you've got the book right there if you need to check, so it isn't really that big of a deal. Now, in the production version, when they get through Kickstarter, it would be good if maybe on these cards they did actually have some, a little bit of area where they could maybe print a small block of text just kind of telling you what that means. But again, it's not that big of a deal if they're not able to do that because there isn't that many things you really have to remember in the game. You will find your event deck. We talked a little bit about that already. You will draw one of those per round. And then there are action cards. You will start the game with 2 of these action cards. They all do different things. Again, having those symbols there at the bottom showing you what these cards actually do. What's important about these cards is at the very top here you'll see a little icon, and those icons are different. You'll see this one here. You'll see this one here is a little bit of a different look of icon. That just indicates what phase of the game these cards can be played in. So not every action card can be played just whenever you want to. There are certain phases of each round that these action cards can actually be played in. So now let's talk a little bit about how this game plays out, because we've hit pretty much all the components in the game. You know what? This right here is actually the different offices of the government. That's probably the only one we haven't hit just yet. So we got like the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Finance. We do have the presidential card that's right here. This is the opposing force. So these are really cool, and you will gain these over the course of play. So you will start out this game with a phase called the presidential election, where you will basically bid. You'll take your little food tokens and you'll bid in your hand secretly, and you'll put it out, and the highest winner is going to become president for that round. But if you are the president, there will be certain bonuses and abilities you'll be able to do as the president for that round. The same with other areas of the government. You'll get some bonuses with Ministry of Defense with action cards, for example, and each one of them does something a little bit different. So you're going to start off with that presidential election, then you're going to go right into something called Parliament Campaigning. That's where you're going to be taking these tokens and you're going to put them on different species, going around the table, and you're going to be taking turns sort of trying to gain votes from the different species. Then you're going to go into a Parliament election, and you're going to see who has the most House seats. One thing that's cool about that Parliament campaigning before the election is that you can use your Ministry of Finance, your Ministry of Defense to do some blocking as well as some baiting of votes in different areas, which I think is something kind of new to the second version of the rules, and I think that's actually a pretty cool little mechanic where you can use these cards to kind of block and bait votes across the board. I thought that was very, very cool. After you have elected Parliament, you then will do the formation of government, which is probably the longest phase of any round. In that round, that's really going to be the players going around the board and discussing, okay, what is everyone going to agree upon? So this phase of the game is all about the negotiations between the players. How do you want to form your government for that next round? And will you even stick to your negotiations when you get in to that next round? Or are you going to be one of those players that is going to kind of set up your political opponents in a way that you'll crush them a round or even 2 rounds into the game, depending on when the next presidential election or the next parliament election is going to take place? And that's where a lot of the fun of this game comes into play. Does everyone stay to their political negotiation agreements, or do they pull back on those things and crush your political opponent under the boot of the government? Then we're going to go right into that vote of no confidence, where if the opposition ever outweighs the majority, there is going to be a vote of no confidence, and you can actually go into trying to reform the government again, and you can vote on that. So you can say, hey, you know what, let's go into negotiations again. This didn't play out the way we thought it was going to play out. Or, no, we're not doing it again. We're just moving forward with the decisions that we made, just like you would do in real government. We're then going to go right into the event. We're going to flip that card over, and that's going to be an event that's going to take place for all the players in the game. So that's going to play out. That event Then we're going to go into something called progression, where one of your players is going to get those shine and that political agenda. The Prime Minister is going to get to actually set a political goal and a political agenda. There's some event cards that can be played in this round as well. Remember, we talked about how each different phase of the game has different icons. You can see a bunch of those here where, depending on which phase of the game it is, players can play different action cards to disrupt what other players are going to try to do within that phase. And that is the game of Zoocracy. Team, again, this has been a bare minimum for Zoocracy. It's going to be on Kickstarter. It's probably on Kickstarter right now for round 2. I do suggest going and check this one out. If you like the theme, if you like the artwork, if you're really into political type games where there's negotiation, there's debate, it is a little bit of a longer gameplay, you're going to really like Zoocracy. So go check it out. Hit that like, click the subscribe below to join the team. Keep rolling them crits. This has been the McGuire Review, and we'll see you next time. Bear, let's roll!